Hello, and welcome to the Texas Rex Educational Series. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the texasrex.org webinars page if you want to review the content or share the information with your friends and colleagues. Our speaker today, Bruce Edmonds, will be speaking about practice project planning, how to devise and implement project plan. All attendees have been muted to block out background noise. If you have questions for our speaker, please post them in the chat block of the GoToWebinar pane. Your questions will be read to the presenter at the end of the presentation. If we are unable to answer your questions during the allotted time, you will receive an answer via email. First, some information about our speaker. Bruce attended Texas Tech University, where he received a BA in English, Spanish, and Political Science. After graduating from Texas Tech, Bruce attended the University of Texas at El Paso, where he graduated magna cum laude with a master's in education in information technology. Prior to joining the West Texas Health IT Regional Extension Center, Bruce worked as a curriculum IT analyst for the Paul L. Foster School of Medicine. Currently, Bruce serves as the Assistant Director for the West Texas Health IT Regional Extension Center, where he refines strategy and implements the appropriate operations to facilitate the adoption of electronic health records, incorporation and implementation of the telehealth and telemedicine grant program, and supports the adoption of health information exchange within West Texas. Thank you for joining us, and now I turn over the webinar to Bruce. Bruce, the presentation is yours.
Great, thank you. Now is everyone, Beto, can you see my children and me, or are you seeing the actual presentation itself?
We can see your presentation.
You can see my presentation, very
Yes.
good. So we're going to talk a little bit about today is project management and what it is and the essentials for it. The reason that there's just so much information when you're dealing with project management, so I'm really going to try to focus on introducing it to you and letting you know really why do we want to do project management, what are kind of the crucial elements that are involved in project management, and ultimately what we have kind of noticed, I guess, through many years of project management experience, what are the pitfalls and a lot of the issues that you can run into when dealing with managing a project. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, the two main questions I would want you guys to be able to answer is, why is project management crucial for a company or an organization's success? And why should organizational leaders become proficient with project management methodologies? So it's not just hiring a project manager, but why that leader, that owner, that CEO, CFO needs to be proficient in these project management methodologies as well. So what is a project? I think the big key here in looking at this is there's a big difference between what a project is, what a task is, and those types of things. So here are a couple examples of what we would consider what a project is versus what's not a project. So if you want to improve the efficiency of a specific production line or something in manufacturing, that is not a project. Organizing a national staff conference is, and I'll get into why some are or why some are not. Really the key here is that projects are really temporary endeavors. So whenever you try to define what a project is, the big key is making sure that you define it as something temporary or short-lived. You always want to develop a plan for communicating systems on policy changes. That is a long-term project. Revising and contracting a purchasing process, so that's a short-term project. Once again, maybe an upgrade to a company website, that is a short-term project, so we would consider it that. Reducing backlog of students and student housing complaints, that might be an ongoing process that goes on for a very long time, so it is not. If you want to redesign a new employee onboarding process when you're bringing on new employees, that's something that exists that you're replacing that is short-lived, so that would be a project. So when you're looking at a project is temporary and short-lived. It has a specific beginning and an end. So it has a start date and an end date. It has some sort of unique output. There's a defined end result that you want. And that is, I guess, the most important part of a project is you want to make sure what that end result is, and we'll talk about how that's defined or how that's determined later. No predefined work assignments or tasks. It's nothing that's been set in stone. It's something that you start off with the blank slate and you work your way forward towards an end. It's something new that's being created. It frequently requires cross-divisional or cross-work unit teams, which basically means you have a cross-functional team that's doing multiple things at once, coming together to whatever that end is, and you need to acquire resources in order to complete it. So the difference between that and other work tasks are usually other work tasks are things that are ongoing, continuous, the monotony of life kind of in work and what you're dealing with. There's no end. It's a repeating cycle or a task. You always have the same output. You have predefined work assignments that you're dealing with. Something is managed or improved. It's not necessarily something that's new. It's something that is already existing that you're just building upon. Typically, another work task can be something that's completed by just a team within a single work unit, and it's not spread out across multiple teams or multiple divisions. And the resources are usually ready available or already assigned to someone. So what is a project? A project is a temporary work effort with a specific beginning and end date that has a unique and clearly defined and measurable outcome. So, you provide some sort of project, it comes in on time, it's on a specific budget, and as usual, they always want it under budget and in last time, so that's very common when you're dealing with the project, but it's usually just a temporary work effort with a specific beginning and an end date. So project management is what? Well, project management is the set of tools, skills, and techniques and the knowledge that enables you to successfully complete this project, whatever that desired result is, whether it is an actual product or if it's just a specific outcome, whatever it is, and you want to achieve a desired result, and it has to be usually on time and or under budget, is usually what your project manager or your program manager has a tendency to tell you whenever they're supplying something. They want you to make it on time and under whatever the defined amount of money that's allotted for the project. So what is it? It's a roadmap for addressing critical questions. It's a method for measuring results. It's a careful method for solving problems. It's a formal mechanism for managing changes. It's a method for communicating your results. It's also a mechanism for evaluating the process. And it's also a vehicle for communicating project activities to others. So that's what project management is. It's kind of this roadmap with everything tied together, and you're trying to reach a common goal in a specific set of time. So project stakeholders. Who are the project stakeholders? So you have project management, you have this whole process. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people involved in getting this taken care of? So the first thing is the customer. Whether it's an internal customer, maybe you work for an IT department inside an organization, your customer is the user that you're working with or a department that you're working with. It can be a customer out in the corporate world that's asking you to do something. Who is that end user? Who's the last final person using whatever it is that you're developing? You have to have a project sponsor. That is the person who is responsible for putting this whole thing on, so to speak. Who's your project leader? Who's in charge of making sure all of these project pieces move in unison? You have your team members, which is the project leader's responsibility to put together. What about resource managers? What type of resources are you trying to tap into? Who are the folks that you're going to have that you're going to call on if you need something? And obviously just roles and responsibilities with other key stakeholders. So you want to read the descriptions of roles and responsibilities for these key stakeholders. So you want to define who that customer is. You want to define who the end user is, who the sponsor is, who the project leader is, and who those members are, and those types of things. So what issues and questions do you have about these types of roles? I mean, is there an issue with who the customer is, who the end user is, who's asking you to do this work? You always want to identify roles, and you want to identify issues that can come up during the process of whatever project it is or whatever it is that you're taking on. So what questions to consider? Like I said, who is the customer? Who is the end user? What is the problem that the project is trying to solve? What is the project's desired objective or outcome? You have to have it deals a lot with change management and the concept of change management, where you're in a specific state of where you are now, and you have to be dissatisfied with where you are now. And you have to see where it is that you want to get to, and that's your future state. That would be your desired outcome, that future state of where you want to get. And project management is that roadmap that gets you from where you are now to where you want to be. So I love this quote, and I'm a sports person, so I'll throw this. Sports people are surrounding themselves with support structures. As project managers, take the leaf out of the sports book. Build a support system around yourself as a project manager. Have people that you can rely on and who you believe in and your abilities, and it will aid you both in your personal success and the success of your team. So what does that mean? It means I, as a project manager with the projects I take on at the West Texas Hitch Rig, I know my limitations. I know where I am. My project team understands what those limitations are, and I am very good to delegate to folks and people on my team who are much better at doing things than I am to make sure that we always have that desired outcome. So sports teams do the same thing. Not everybody can do everything, so what do? You try to build a team around your deficiencies and get people to plug in those holes. That's what makes a good project manager and a good project team. So the roles of the manager and of the team are what? So there's some different roles, and there's a detailed role for the project manager and a defined role for the project team. So how do you summarize the core role and the functions for the project leader? You need to summarize this. You need to figure out who is that leader, who is that manager, and what is his role. You also want to summarize the functions of each team member. So if you're dealing with a financial project, if you're dealing with the grant, if you're dealing with a health IT issue, just a regular IT issue, you want to define those roles and responsibilities for the people that you're bringing on your team. And when bringing in a team, not everybody gets along, we know that. Not all projects, not all departments get along. There's always tension. You always want to define what tension might occur between relationships, between individual team members, and also as a manager, you need to understand how if you ask somebody for something or those types of things, there has to be two-way communication. And as a manager, you need to be willing to listen to criticism from your team members so you can better improve what it is that you're working on in the future. So don't be afraid of constructive criticism from your team, and your team members also have to be willing to take the brunt of if something's done wrong, we fix it. That way the next time we don't make the same mistakes. So roles have to be defined. So roles in the project life cycle. So here's kind of a very common project management phase, and what I did is I took it based on a business model, which is usually the best way you want to look at project management. So no matter what it is that you're dealing with, there's always a monetary figure involved with this, whether it's people's time involved in this on a grant, the amount of resources that you need to pull on to do things, or from a business standpoint, it's crucial that you always stay within budget. So there's basically 5 very good defined phases that you have. Phase 0 is the project proposal. So at some point there's an RFP or there's some sort of proposal for something to get done. Once that gets done and the proposal's out there, then we need to define what is that project, what is it that we need to do to accomplish what the proposal is asking for. And once we've defined the project, then we have to develop a plan in order to address that. So step 1 is, are we going to pursue this or not? And then through the defining of the project, we need to clarify what are the circumstances, what are the requirements, what is it that we need to get accomplished in order to create a plan. And then we develop and submit whatever that plan is to, as a team, to whoever the stakeholder is that's asking us to do this, whether it's a client or your boss or a VP or a CEO or a CFO, whoever that is. We develop a proposal plan, submit it to that client, and they make a decision, and they say, yes, go with it or don't go with it. Once they say, yes, we like what you're doing with this, then we implement a project plan, and we implement the actual project itself. Once we do that, then you sit down with your client, whoever it is that the end user is, that customer, and you set up and you clarify the contract. What is it specifically that you're asking for? How are we going to get there? Once we get feedback from the client in this 4th phase, and you go back and you design and develop, if required, any other additional changes to the proposal or what it is that you're trying to complete. Obviously, you have to resolve logistics. Logistics means movement of information, movement of different parts, so we need to make sure that we have a chain of command, how things are getting delegated, how things are getting done, and you define roles and responsibilities at this point. And then you obviously have to deliver what it is that you're trying to provide, whether it's a website that you're creating, whether it's a small project, whether you're submitting a grant, whether you are they've asked you for some short-term fix on something that you need to fix. That's what you do, and at that point you deliver that service, and obviously you have to follow up and make sure that everything is running smoothly, and if there's anything that needs to be fixed, at that point you do that, and if there's not, then you go ahead and close out the project, and it's done. So like I said, there's a very defined beginning and an end with the project, so this is kind of the process of going through that. So what does it take to do? The first thing you need to do is there has to be a problem. If there's not a problem, there's no opportunity for change. So you have to take the original project proposal, whatever it is that they're asking you to do, and you have to define it more precisely. So what is the problem the project is trying to solve? Is there a problem? Is there something we're trying to fix? What is that? What does the business unit, the project sponsor, envision as the desired outcome? So like I said, just like with change management, you have to be dissatisfied with your current state, and you need to know where you want to get, which is that future state, and the process of getting there is the project management process. So what is the problem? We're not happy with where we are. Where do we want to get? And then who are the key stakeholders who are driving this project? Is it a customer? Is it your IT department? Is it another department, a financial department? Define who are the key people that are going to be involved in making this change happen. And then ultimately, how will the customer or that end user benefit from this project? So it's great that we have this idea, this thing that we want to get to. Is there a benefit? Is it worth going through all this work and using all these resources? Is the desired outcome worth the effort? So those are the different problems that you want to define. So one of the good things is if you don't know how to get there, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. That's the greatest thing about project management. There's 1,000 different roads that you can take. It's usually not a straight path, and if it is a straight path, then you're probably not on the right one. It's usually the case behind it. Usually you're veering off in many different directions trying to get to that end game. So I love this quote about if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So determining project priorities. Once you've defined that problem, what are the priorities? So there's 3 constraints on any project, and they always fall under these 3 categories no matter how you look at it. And if you've studied for a PMP and you've done these things, they've drilled this into you. The first thing is the cost of the project. How much is this going to cost the consumer? How much is this going to cost the organization? Beyond that, the next thing that you want to look at is the schedule itself. What is the timeline and the scope of the project? What is the scope? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? So why do we need the customer to tell us what is important to us? Well, how much money do they have? When do they need it by? What is it that they want done specifically? What is the scope of the project? So we want to gather customer expectations, functions. What is the final project deliverable, and what should we be able to do? So ultimately, what is that deliverable? What is it that you want it to do? What are features? Is it physical things? Is it an actual product? Is it just a tangible thing, a non-tangible thing that you're supplying for them? Usually it's a tangible thing in terms of a product or something. And one of the things that my father always told me that I can tell you with projects and with anything else when you're dealing with the project and dealing with the customer, and this is not only with project management, but with any type of sales or any time you're dealing with somebody, you always want to under-promise and over-deliver. That way you can meet expectations and always exceed them. If you promise something by Monday, more than likely you know that you can have that by Friday, and you submit it on Friday. You don't want to tell somebody you'll have something by Monday and deliver it on Tuesday. You always want to, as people say, under-promise and over-deliver. That is the key in dealing with customer expectations. So you can't always get what you want. Customers are very fickle. Other departments, what people ask for are very fickle. So what does the customer want and what does he need are not necessarily the same thing. What is the want? What is it that they want? What is it that you know that they need? So need breeds opportunity. What they want, once again, is very different than need. So why does this matter? Well, you want to sort through these things out because a lot of things, what happens is, the want and the need are 2 completely separate things. Need is what is that final outcome that will give a benefit to the customer versus what the customer wants, which might not necessarily be the solution to what they're looking for. In order to do this, what you need to do is you really need to identify team members based on that problem and make sure that you have the skills on staff and the skills within your team member to be able to complete that need or that want that the customer has. And you're really trying to push that customer's want more towards what they need. So you want to identify skills and knowledge that's required to move the project forward. You want to identify the resources or the resource area from where these skills and knowledge are going to come from. You want to estimate the percentage of time that's required for the project. So just like with the grant, which is a lot of the experience that we've been dealing with, you have percentage of time that people are put onto specific grants. It's the same thing with the company. How much time am I going to take away from my employees' day-to-day activities and tasks in order to complete this project? So the right team will determine the project's success. You don't want to have the typical person who doesn't answer emails, doesn't return calls, can't make up their mind, never shows up to meetings. You can't have that person on the team because it's just going to delay the process and move forward. You want to have team members that are bought into it, and you want to give them expectations that are realistic as well as a project manager. So when dealing with the problem, I have yet to see any problem, however complicated, which when you look at it in the right way, did not become still more complicated. The more you look at a problem, the more complicated it gets. It's just a fact of life. The more you analyze things, the more different ways you can look at it. Research out there is based on taking one tiny little artifact, one project, and analyzing it from so many different angles that it starts to become convoluted. So it's always important to keep that end in mind. So the more you look at something, the more complicated it gets. So you need to make sure that you have the right team in place to keep you on path and moving forward. So you always want to prioritize functions and features. And when we're talking about functions and features, we're talking about those needs and those wants and what it is. So you want to make sure that you deliver into 3 different groupings that you have. When you break down and you talk to a customer, you tell them what is it that you must have? What is it that you have to have now? What is the #1 desired outcome? So you want to prioritize what they want. What is desirable to have that might be based on getting to that point of what they must have. We might be able to hit upon these highly desirable things that they want. And then obviously there's the bells and whistles that can come along with any project, that is that ancillary things that can be tagged on. So you always want to break out the must-haves, what would be nice to have, and the proximity of things that are desirable that are not necessarily that key. And I love this quote, it's nice to have a wolf around the house, but is it totally necessary? Probably not. So you always want to define it into those 3 categories. So after you've decided you're going to go with the project, the second phase is you want to develop the plan. So you want to finalize the charter. By charter, what does that mean? There's a project charter that defines key stakeholders, deadlines, key activities, and if you want, you can literally Google project charter template, and there's tons of stuff out there for you, but you really do want to have some sort of charter that defines who's involved, when, roles and responsibilities, and different activities that you'll be dealing with deadlines and those types of things to make sure that you don't miss anything. You want to finalize your team membership, who's the leadership, what type of structure are you going with? Are you doing a team-based approach? Are you doing a top-to-bottom, bottom-to-top approach in this? You want to verify the customer's needs. Once again, wants versus needs. You want to develop a work breakdown structure. What does that mean? So a work breakdown structure talks about how much time are you allotting to things, how much actual work is involved in completing this project. You want to see any risks that are involved. If we do this, what's going to happen? What are the repercussions of doing this or not doing this? You want to identify key milestones and the time that it's going to take to hit those milestones. You want to develop a network diagram, which is basically a communication way. Is there a chain of command? Who's the lead? You don't want 1,000 voices going to the same person, where you have maybe some sort of chain of command where different groups are reporting to one specific person to keep things kind of organized and well-oiled. You want to identify the types of resources that you need. Obviously, you want to estimate the costs, and that doesn't necessarily mean physical cost, but it also means time involved in the project. How much is it going to cost you from a personnel standpoint to get this thing? And obviously, you want to get what is the key output? What is that final thing? And you want to get approval for that, and that becomes your project plan. What is the key or that future state that you want to reach with your project? Whether it's a tangible deliverable, whether it's a website, whether it's a new report, whatever it is, a new process that you're going to put in place, whatever it is, but you want to make sure that that gets approved before you move forward, and that's how you develop the plan. You always want to verify, once again, the needs and requirements. You always want to go back to the customer and verify that information. Things change during the course of a project, and you want to make sure that you're on top of it. That way, you don't go through a whole project and something has changed in the customer's mind where what you deliver is not what they wanted. It might have been what they initially wanted, but they might have changed their mind. So you always want to go back and reaffirm and make sure that during your process of creating your project plan, if there's any changes, that you go back and revisit that. So what are the customer's needs? You need to affirm the need and the root causes behind the driving problem or the challenge. What is it that they need? Make sure that you get to the base of that, to the root of that, because that usually will not change. There's always that issue in place, and you want to define that. What's that final deliverable? You want to make sure that what you're giving them is something that they want, and then it's measurable, and it shows that it's been successful. And obviously under customer requirements, they're going to tell you, I want this, I want that, I need this, I need that. You really need to define those customer requirements and always go back and revalidate that information as you're going through the project. Phase 3 is actual implementation. So once you've created your project plan, you've got your feedback from your client or whoever it is that you're doing the project for, then you want to implement. So you want to develop, once again, this deals with the networking plan. This is, let's have a really good communication plan. Let's start to begin the implementation phase. How are we going to monitor and evaluate performance? Are people doing what we're asking them to do by the allotted time? If there's any changes to the project, we need to make sure that we implement those changes and not go through the whole process and then have to go back and start over because of some sort of change that's been requested. If there's any issues, you want to take corrective action. You always want to have progress reports to key stakeholders, and that doesn't have to be a written progress report. You can have either weekly calls or monthly calls depending on the duration of the project to say, hey, here's where we are, here's what we're working on, here's what we're going to have by next week, any feedback on this, and you have kind of a cascading effect with these projects to make sure that they're always in the loop and always giving you feedback as you're going through the process. You don't want to start something, 6 months later deliver something without any feedback from your stakeholders. So it's important that you have progress reports for anybody involved. What are the key outputs? Is it the same? Has there been a change in what you're delivering? If there is, you always want to make sure that those are approved. There might be an increase in cost based on the changes. You always want to communicate that and make sure that people understand that. It's kind of like when you're remodeling a house and the initial quote talks about having plastic covers on the light switches, but the person now wants stainless steel. Obviously, the stainless steel ones are these nicer light switches are going to be a lot more expensive, but you need to communicate that and say, yes, we can get you this, but it's going to cost you so much. You always want to approve those changes. Always, obviously, requests and deliverables always have to be implemented as well. What type of requests are being done? What's the final deliverable that you want to have? So I love this. This is just every computer's been equipped with the compass to keep your team on course. If you have a good project plan, really, computers can either be the downfall or not of a project. You don't want to rely totally on technology. As you guys know, technology seems to fail when you need it the most, so you always want to make sure you have that backup plan to make sure that everything is on point and moving forward. So evaluating the team's progress. What do you have to do? So what will the project manager and the team be tracking? What exactly is it that we're looking at? We need to define what it is so we can track it. And then we want to know, are we on target? Are we not? Are we hitting deadlines? Also, how do we monitor the success of the project? Do we have little small wins to make sure that we know that we're progressing? Is there some sort of end result that we want to reach to consider this project a success? A lot of times a project does not reach the end or what you specifically wanted to meet, but the process of getting there provided a lot of little wins and made a lot of successful implementations, even though you might not have gotten to the very end. So there can be small successes and large successes within a project, and that will help you deem whether a project was successful or not. You always want to be monitoring the project. You want to look at the cost, the resources. Has cost changed? Are we still on time? Has the scope of the project changed? Has anything changed? You always want to constantly be looking at that with the magnifying glass, basically, making sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Monitoring project activities. There's always, once you get into a project, like I said, the more you look at something, it just becomes overwhelming if you don't keep scanning the environment, looking and managing those changes, tracking those changes. If not, it's just something that you cannot handle. So you always want to make sure you check to see what you're doing. You want to manage those changes, and you want to track those changes and see where you are or where you are not. Communicating with the customer and key stakeholders is key to this. If there's any type of change or anything, you always want to receive feedback from those folks that have asked you to do the work. Once you find something, if there is an issue or something you find, you always want to take corrective action on it. So what actions can a team take if the project is behind schedule? What type of actions can a team make if the project is going over budget? You always want to make sure that you're on time and on budget. If you're not, then you need to take corrective action. And if anything, a lot of the time those things are because there's been a change in the project and you just want approval for those changes. And that might be the corrective action. That you stay on course. You just communicate the fact that, you know what, these changes that you've requested are going to put us behind schedule. They're going to make it cost a little bit more, whatever it is, but they need to be okay with it. So phase 3 is continuation of the implementation. So you do an initial project plan, you implement it, you go back and you revert back to the client's needs. Maybe there's a change. You always want to go back and look at that communication plan, make sure that everything's still running smoothly. You want to continue monitoring information. You want to continue with the implementation plan. You want to continue managing changes. Obviously, taking corrective action is the next step. Always reporting progress once again, and always making sure that there's any change requests or deliverables, that key outputs are approved. So whatever it is that you're delivering, if it's different from the original deliverable, you want to make sure that that's approved, whether it's more money, more time involved in that, all of that needs to be communicated. So once all of this is done, you want to close out the project. You've gone through the entire process. The final step is let's close out this project. So what specific actions or steps should a project team take to close out a project? So you always want to look for efficient solutions on how to do it. If somebody's looking for something, you want to close things out in the best manner possible. What I've found through my experience in closing out is you want to have kind of a final project audit. What went wrong? What went well? What did we not like from an internal process that we could do better next time? So you always want to audit your process and what worked and what didn't work. You want to obtain customer acceptance of deliverables. So when you go there and you supply something, are they happy with it? Yes, fantastic, project is closing out. Then you want to have always some sort of what we would call customer perception of the project, whether it's a satisfaction survey, whatever it is, to see what the customer felt, how they felt they were treated, because you can always go back and fix things. If they felt communication wasn't good, you can identify where that was lacking and go back and fix that the next time around. And then you want to talk to your team members and say, hey, how did this thing go? What could we have done better? Is there something I did that I could not have done, that I could have done better as a project manager, and vice versa with the team, to make sure that we understand that the perception of your team is just as important as that of the customer. We want to identify the lessons learned. What is it that we changed? What is it that we can do better next time around? And obviously, once all that's done, then we want to report out a final, whoever that final stakeholder is, who that customer is. We want to report back to them and either thank them and let them know, here's what you have, here's your final deliverable, here's the report, here's the cost, here's the budget, here's the timeline, here's everything we did for you. You want to create some sort of closure for that customer, for that department, to let them know that something's been completed before you can move on. So under customer acceptance and evaluation, does the customer accept the deliverable? If yes, then you just move on to the evaluation of it. If no, then you obviously need to schedule a meeting with all the key stakeholders and discuss next steps. Do we need to go back and do this all again? At this point, obviously, it's rather late because you should have been doing this during the process, but if what you deliver is not good enough, then how do you go back and fix that? Hopefully it's a yes if you've done everything properly, but there's been times where things are not up to standard, and it happens. So it's either a yes or a no. So what I've done for you here, and if you get my application, if you get this presentation, you're more than welcome to take this, but really here's a checklist of what you want to look at. You want to do an internal audit. Was the scope fulfilled? What they asked you to do, was that done? Was it completed on time? Was it completed under budget, below budget, or not? And then obviously you want to look at the sponsors. So the person who supported you in this, the person who gave you all this information, is that final deliverable acceptable? And are they good with closing out the project? Did the customer accept the project? And then has the customer evaluated the effectiveness of the project? Once you deliver something, let's say it's a web page and you change the website and they're finally clicking through it. Is it effective? Is that website a good website after the changes that you've implemented? Is there something else that needs to be done to it? Obviously, you want to document your lessons learned. What went bad? What are we going to do to fix it? You want to have a one-on-one meeting with your customer, whoever that person is. You want to sit down as a project manager and say, hey, are you happy with everything? Shake their hand and leave the door open for next time when they need something. All stakeholders are notified that the project has been completed. What were the results? You want to have any documents, files, and records, have all that been set aside. We all understand that there's a lot of turnover with certain things. As a project manager, you want to make sure that that project is all detailed, put away, because at some point, more than likely, you'll be able to come back to that project and not reinvent the wheel and probably apply it to other projects that have been out there. You want to close out your report. Has everything been provided to your stakeholders, to your customer, to anyone involved, to make sure that everybody knows that it's over? And any resources that you use, make sure that once they're taken off the project, they're reassigned back to where they were, and they're either working on another project or they're just back to their regular tasks and what they're doing. And obviously, once you're done, you have to schedule some sort of celebration that stuff has been done. You always want to have some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. It's not just always work. You always want to make sure that people feel like what we've done is really accomplished something. So with that final report, obviously you want to have what were the key results and deliverables, what was the cost, what were the perceptions of everybody, what are the lessons learned, and where can we learn different things. Where are areas for improvement as we move forward with our projects, on other projects as we move forward. So you have to have an action plan, obviously. Once you identify those issues for the next time around, what are we going to stop doing that we did last time? What are we going to continue doing that we did well last time? What are we going to start doing the next time that we didn't do this time around? And then finally, you want to look at the 14, what we call 14 deadly sins of project management. And this is really important that you guys keep this. If you always keep this in the back of your mind and you kind of answer these different sins as we've coined them, then you will always be able to at least address most of the issues that you're going to have during a project. The first thing is you always want to define, you need to have to define a problem. So failure to define a problem is a big issue. You need to make sure you define a project plan with sufficient data. If you don't have enough input from key stakeholders and clients and all those types of folks, you're going to have a lot of issues trying to come up with a solid project plan. You need to do project planning as a group versus implementation group. So you have a planning group and you have an implementation. You can't do the planning and implementation at the same time. They have to be two separate phases. You plan and then you implement. If there's no one leading the project, or if you have too many leaders, there has to be a tendency to be too many voices. That's where I talk about a chain of command, where you have a project leader, maybe you distribute or you give roles and responsibilities to everybody, so you don't have a bunch of chiefs and nobody doing the work. And that can cause a lot of problems with the project. You always want to make sure your estimates and times for resources are not guesses, and they're very accurate based on experience and what you expect. Top leadership, senior management needs to accept realities of a project. And once again, that goes back to needs versus wants, what is highly desirable. There has to be some sort of constraints where the folks asking you to do something need to understand that there's constraints to a project, and they need to accept those and accept the reality of situations that they might not necessarily get what they want, but we can deliver something that will be within the scope of what the project was intended to do. Obviously, you need to plan on resources. If you don't do that, you're in a lot of trouble, because you might need more or you might need less, and you might overcompensate or undercompensate in terms of the resources that you need, so they have to be well planned. Well, you need to make sure that your team sees itself as a team, not just a bunch of people running around or it's just somebody telling folks what to do. You really need to make it a team environment where people are giving feedback to each other, coming back and forth. If it's not a team, it's not going to move anywhere. People who are pulled off a project by team sponsors, that's always difficult, and it happens all the time. You might have your team nice and settled, and something else comes up, and they take that person off of your team and send them somewhere else, and then you're left with that resource that you were counting on, and now you have to figure out how to fill that void. So it's always important, and this has a tendency to happen, that you delegate time appropriately for your staff so that even if they do get pulled off onto another project, they can still complete what you're asking them to do. Maybe there's not enough detail in the project plan because you didn't get enough feedback, and ultimately it might end up failing. Implementation results are not monitored or tracked consistently. You have to be constantly looking and monitoring things and getting feedback from folks. people lose sight of what the original goal was. That happens a lot of times. You get so involved in something, you forget what you're trying to finish, and you end up going somewhere else, and ultimately it's not what you're looking for. That happens quite a bit. You want to make sure that the risks are anticipated and calculated. You have to figure out what is it that we expect to go wrong, and let's try to hedge those issues as much as possible. If you don't even look at that, you might be in a lot of trouble down the road. And finally, if the project is led by technical staff or someone on the business side, is it a technical issue? Is it a financial issue? If it's a financial issue, obviously you want the business folks to take care of it, but you don't want a business person trying to take care of technical issues, or you want someone with a technical expertise trying to tell someone how to financially manage something. So it's always important that the project lead be the exact person for that job, whether it's a financial, technical, whatever it is. You can't expect that person to do everything. So that's all I've got for you guys, and thank you guys so much. I went through this fairly quickly, but like I said, there's a lot there and not a lot of time to go through it, and I am more than open to answer any questions that you might have with this and any clarification, and thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. We currently don't have any questions, so please, if you want to ask something, go ahead. In the meantime, we'd like to give a mini advertisement. Mercedes Tuchisela from the Central East Rec is going to talk about the services they offer. Mercedes, are you there? Mercedes, are you there?
Oh, yes, yes.
So if you want to go ahead and talk about what Central East Rec offers.
Sure. Howdy, y'all. We are the Centreast Regional Extension Center. We're located in College Station, Texas, and we cover the territory of Central and East Texas. At the moment, we offer health IT services like the other regional extension centers in Texas, and we have from EHR vendor selection to all the way to meaningful use audit preparation. We customize our services to the client's needs. We have our main clients are small practices, but we also have medium practices and hospitals too. At the moment, we have services that are fee-for-service, which means that we charge per hour plus travel at a state rate. But and we also are targeting our services to hospitals. We have several clients that have asked for patient engagement support, which means that we will work with their trainers and their staff in order for them to engage their patients in the use of the patient portal and to achieve the meaningful use stage 2. Also, we have also right now done a privacy and security risk assessment dashboard in which we can conduct and identify and make recommendations for privacy and security controls. So, and then the next service that we also offer, apart from the stage 1 and the stage 2 meaningful use readiness, is the meaningful use audit preparation, which means is that we assist compiling the support documentation for the practice in case they have an audit or they already have a letter of an auditor. That's about it, and we are affiliated with Texas A&M Health Science Center, the College of Medicine, and we are housed under the Rural and Community Health Institute. And our information is in the PowerPoint. It's in College Station, and we'll also be relaunching our website pretty soon, and we'll be emailing everybody about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. Well, people is asking if they can have a copy of the presentation. So yes, after we finish with the webinar, I'm going to send the presentation, and also this presentation is being recorded. I want to thank our speaker for taking time out of his busy day to share his knowledge with us. If you have any questions for today's presenter, please email Texas Rec using the email shown, and we'll make sure you get an answer. Please join us next month for our next educational webinar in the series. We'll be presenting workflows, how to incorporate patient portals and registry connections into your workflow. It's going to be on October 1st, and hope to see you there. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Goodbye.